From the time that they pronounced me dead was a good 45 minutes.
They cut my clothes and then they paddled my heart because my heart had stopped. And I could see people screaming and crying, but I didn't realize that was actually my physical body because I was somewhere else.
The only thing that I could feel, if you could imagine, absolute love and peace. There wasn't anything else to be felt.
I was greeted by people I had known in the past.
I'm back home again.
Incredibly safe and felt at home.
Welcome everybody to Round Trip Death. And I'd like to welcome Marilynn Hughes, who's with us for the first time today. Good morning, Marilynn.
Good morning, Eric.
I'm so glad you reached out, and we've chatted before about what happened to you, and people are going to find this absolutely fascinating. Before we jump into it, I want everybody to get to know you. Who's Marilynn?
I'm just an old grandma with, I have 3 adult children. I have 2 grandchildren. I was raised in mostly Ohio, although I was born in California. I migrated to Colorado and I raised my kids there for 25 years. I live now in Arizona. I've been a writer most of my life because in the beginning of my early 20s, I started having out-of-body experiences, which I began to journal. Love the outdoors, loved the mountains of Colorado, and now we have the deserts where I'm at now. I am now Catholic, but I wasn't Catholic before these things happened to me. The experiences that I've had have led me to become Catholic about 25 years ago in the Jubilee year of 2000.
That's good. You know what? Let's do this. Let's start with the near-death experience. And if we have time, maybe we'll get into some of the other out-of-body type experiences. I know that's a passion of yours right now, and you have a foundation, and we'll stick all that in the show notes for people that want to find it and find you. But let's go back a few years. Well, this happened in 2003, but what led up to it earlier on?
Well, shortly after my youngest child was born, I was diagnosed with peripartum cardiomyopathy, which is a pretty kind of rare complication of pregnancy, but I was diagnosed a little bit late. So I was in heart failure. And what that means with peripartum cardiomyopathy with associated heart failure is your heart's enlarged and it's not pumping right. It is one of the most cardiomyopathy, any form of it, not necessarily peripartum, is one of the most common reasons people will get heart transplants. By the time 2003 rolled around, my heart was not doing very well. My doctors had suggested, based on some of the testing they had done and my symptomology, that they should do a cardiac catheterization. They were going to have a chopper standing by because I lived in the mountains of Colorado, and they were going to send me up to the University of Colorado in Denver, where I'd been a few times, and they would take it from there. That's where they did the transplanting. They had a transplant hospital up there, and I'd been up there and been typed out before. And this is what they were going to do. That was the plan. And so the night before I was supposed to go in for the procedure, I had some kind of an arrhythmia or something went wrong. And all of a sudden I was out of my body and I was standing before the dark tunnel with the light at the end. I was very excited because I saw sitting in the light my little dog Joy, who was my terrier that I had for like 25 years, most of my childhood. And so I was so excited to see her because she was my little dog and I hadn't seen her in a long time. And she was just very happy to see me, wanted to see me. So I was thrilled about that. And I went towards this light, going down the tunnel. As I went down the tunnel, there were a few different things going on all around. The world was off in the distance. I could see it and hear it in the distance. So I was up in space and I knew that because I could see the whole earth. It was like a round globe over there. And we were up here and the Lord Jesus had appeared and he had come and he was wearing the robes of the Sacred Heart. It was beautiful. It was the white and the red and he had the beautiful heart that he shows in all the images that you see. And it was much more brilliant, of course, than what we would see on earth in our paintings and things like that. Off in the distance, you could see, you could not fathom them yet, but you could see off in the distance, like these overlapping worlds. They were all there were like many of them. I wouldn't say I could see infinities of them yet, but I knew that there were many of them from there. So now I'm walking down the tunnel. I get to the end of the tunnel, and there's this pale light flowing barrier at the end where the light is. And I know, I have had these out of body experiences throughout my life. I know that if I touch that light or try to go through it, that I will not be able to return. This is like a point of no return. And so I'm, just thinking and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I really want to touch it. I really want to touch it. I want to go through, but I'm afraid that if I do that, I have to leave permanently. And then I make the decision, no, I'm not going to touch it. And I start turning back.
And you had young children at the time, right?
I did. My children were very small. So my youngest was probably about 2. My kids were a little further apart in age just because of the way things turned out. So I had probably about 12, 5, and 2. And so I had younger kids. They all needed me. I'm walking back, and Jesus takes my hand and we whoosh up into the sky. He takes me beyond another barrier that I know I'm not really allowed to go past, unless I'm not going back. But there's this sense that's given me immediately not to worry about it. It's all okay. Jesus is giving me some kind of permission for this. So now I am taken into these worlds that I saw just the outskirts of from before. I'm like literally traveling like with him at the speed of light, through these worlds. And so all of these are like different spheres, realms, and each one of them has their own colors and their own energy and vibration and pulse. And they're all extremely beautiful. But I'm only, wisping through them very, very fast with the Lord. And then he brings me back to the front end of where the tunnel was. And at the side of the tunnel is this, it's like an old fashioned stick thing. It's like a way to judge something, a way to meter something, but it's with sticks. So you know how we still do when our children are young, we try to put up little things on the wall to gauge how tall they are, right? It was something like this, but there were sticks. And this was different. This was how do we gauge the development of different souls in relation to their selflessness versus selfishness. When the stick was at the ground, that meant that they were totally engrossed in selfishness. And as it moved up, the soul was cultivating selflessness and more selflessness. And there was a level that was about waist high, which is what we needed to achieve in the earthly sphere in order to kind of complete our lessons here and move on to the next level. And so the Lord showed me different things about people in my life and how some of them did struggle a lot with this selfishness. But he showed me that my stick was in a good place that allowed me, if I wished, to leave at this time. That I could go if I wanted, but I could go, leave the planet, or I could stay. It was kind of up to me. And then he directed my attention to the world, which was back here. And so the world, the big blue white planet over here. And as he directed my attention to the planet, I heard these shrieks, screams, and people just yelling at each other and complaining. And it was this horrible sound. It was terrible. It was this sound of, like, I guess you could call it cacophony. It was the sound of souls that were in such inner discord that they were there. because this was what this realm served. It was trying to it was kind of like a bathtub for selfishness. They're trying to work it out of their souls, right? It's a mortal realm. And we had to work out that good and evil, that light and darkness within each of ourselves in this realm. So I could hear this cacophony. And the Lord said to me, as he walked me over, standing in front of the tunnel of light again, he said, if you go back, that will not change. You cannot change that. That world serves its purpose to perfection. You can't fix it, but it's still your choice. And I said to him, well, as long as I have a choice, I have to go back because I have 3 young children. And so I will go back, Lord. And he nodded in agreement. And he said to me, he said, then I want you to go back and pray to receive a heart transplant. And at that moment, I got very kind of pensive and uncomfortable. And I thought for a few moments. And then I just said to him, I said, I'm sorry, Lord, I cannot do that. But what I will do is I will go back and I will do the best that I can with my heart, the one that I've got, the one that you gave me. And I will pray that the person who's perfectly healthy, who would have to die to give me a new heart, is spared. And all got silent. It was all a rush of silence. It's like, when you hear that word, like in scripture or something, it was like, phew. Everything was silent for just a minute. And then he said, I grant that. Very quietly, he said, I grant that. And then he quietly took my hand. And I was so honored when he took my hand again. And then he lifted me up like in a whoosh, you can't believe. And we started flying me through space towards the earth. We headed towards what was like a way station. But in this way station, what was similar to like a coffee shop bookstore type thing. We got there so fast, it was almost like, phew. And we're sitting at a table and he's talking to me and he's very intense. And there's all these books around us, all these bookshelves of people who have written books. They're all spiritual books, right? And he looks at me and he says, I'm not going to heal you. I'm going to help you. And I'm going to make good use of you for the time that you have left. And then he raises his hands like this to direct me to look up at this bookshelf that's in front of us. So I turn my head up to look up there, and there's a whole bunch of books. And then he's trying to indicate, look closer, look closer. And I notice that on the binding, that my name is there as the author. And there's a whole bunch of them. And I'm a little bit confused by that because at that time I had written 2 books. At this point, it's more like it's becoming now more telepathic. So I'm looking at him and I'm thinking to Jesus, are you telling me I'm going to write all those? How is that going to happen? What are you talking about? What does this mean? That's kind of what I'm doing, right? He just says this. He looks, he points, and he looks at me like this with this intensive gaze and points at the books. And I look at them again. I just say, okay. And then we both go back, but then he's no longer holding my hand. I'm shooting through space. He's disappeared and I'm awaking in my body.
All right, let's take a breath. Okay, that was a lot. I had 20 questions along the way, but I did not want to interrupt. Wow, let's break this down. Where do you want to start? What part do you want to talk more about first?
It might be good to give the final part and then break it down, which was when I went into the catheterization and came out.
Go for it.
Okay. So then I had to hurry up and go to the hospital, right? We got the chopper on the hospital. We got the doctor waiting to do the catheterization. And to make a very long story short, I go in for the catheterization. The plan is I'm going to wake up in Denver. They're going to chopper me up there, right? but I wake up in the mountain town that I'm living in. And I asked my doctor, what's going on? Why am I here? I don't understand. And he says, well, we don't really know what happened or how to explain this, but your heart, it's not cured or anything, but it's significantly better than it was last week. And it's better enough that we don't need to send you up there. And so you're good. We're going to send you home and we're going to add this medication and we're just going to go from here. And I knew immediately, Jesus said, I'm not going to cure you, but I'm going to help you. I knew he had helped me. And that's where it ended.
Has that been the case ever since? Did you ever need the transplant or anything?
Actually, what ended up happening was I went through 15 years of having the cardiomyopathy heart failure. And then 15 years later, my heart spontaneously healed, which I've been told by many doctors is not possible. And a couple of doctors have told me, a couple of doctors of faith have told me that's actually a miracle.
Yeah. Awesome.
Depending on who you ask, they'll say,
A lot of doctors don't want to say that M word, do they?
right. And that's okay. Because they're just trying to understand. And they did use medications to get me through it. And, the doctors were part of the miracle. I never want to ever forget or dismiss that. They were part of that whole miracle. Doctors work miracles too. God uses them. And so they were part of the whole thing.
All right. Let's go back to the very beginning part. This tunnel you're talking about is unusual. And first of all, well, it seems like I say this all the time, but no two NDEs are the same. We think, oh, there's a tunnel and you go towards the light. That really doesn't happen that often. Okay. So yours is really cool from that standpoint. But I don't really understand the tunnel, how if you're in some kind of a tunnel, you're also seeing the world and seeing Jesus and seeing all these other worlds. Explain the tunnel a little bit more. Was it like transparent or?
This tunnel had some transparency to it. And what's interesting, I can just go a little farther with that, just to let the audience know that I've had the out of body experiences for 40 years. And so I've learned that there are a lot of different types of tunnels that people travel through in the mystical spheres.
Quick break to thank our newest sponsor, Rula. How is your holiday season so far? If the stress has become simply unmanageable, or if you're dealing with a breakup, death with a loved one, or any of life's bumps that just seem too big right now, it may be time to talk to someone, a professional therapist. That's where Rula comes in. It's simply a great place to get matched with the right therapist. In fact, click there today and have your first session as soon as tomorrow. And if you have insurance, they can make it really inexpensive, typically just $15 per session. See what it's all about at rula.com/round trip. That's RULA.com/ROUNDTRIP, no spaces. You'll find a link right down in the show notes. Give it a try today. Go to rula.com/round trip. That's RULA.com/round trip for quality therapy that's covered by insurance.
This particular tunnel that I was seeing, there was some transparency to it. It was like a membrane, but there are other tunnels that are very similar, that are dark with the light at the end, that do not have that same transparency, and they're very different. And so it's kind of important to know that they're not all the same. And there are different ones that have thin ribbing in them, and these are not usually associated with near death experiences. They're usually associated with traveling into mystery realms and things like that. But this particular tunnel did have some transparency to it. Another part that is different when you're in a near death experience is that you do have this, I'm not sure, there's probably a word for it that I'm not thinking up off the top of my head. You do have this ability to have like an awareness of this self here, this self looking here, this self remembering what was back here. And so there is this omnipresence that you have that is different than you have in a physical body. And so people can get confused when you're actually having this ability in a near death experience or an experience of a mystical nature to see more than one place at the same time. But it's actually very common in mystical experience.
Besides Jesus, did you see any other people or beings of any kind?
My dog.
You mentioned the dog, yes. Didn't mean to leave the dog out.
My cute little dog.
What was that like? Was that like a big reunion?
It was, I know it sounds so petty, but it was just so awesome to see my dog. And there was something very mystically special about seeing her. People forget, well, we forget this about our loved ones too. Every remembrance we have of someone we've loved when we cross over is a beautiful reunion. So even with our animals, it's just a beautiful reunion. In terms of seeing other beings, mostly not in this experience, except there were others. I guess the way to put it, there were no other main characters in this experience. I saw members of my family, like my current family, where I was being shown things. I was being shown things about my family that I usually keep private, about my children and things that were going to happen to them as they grew older. But they're adults now, and I like to give them their privacy. I was shown things about my husband. I was shown other people that were floating around. And in the way station, there were other people in this place, this coffee shop-esque kind of place. But in terms of communicating with them, we did not do that.
Okay. Next question. I want you to think for just a second before you answer and really go back in your memory here. What did it feel like when Jesus took your hand?
It felt like the wisdom and the breath of 1,000 fathers and mothers wisping you into their arms. I mean, it's the epitome of falling into the arms of the Father. You know what I mean? There's nothing that can compare, because the love, the unconditional love that you are experiencing, everyone well, I shouldn't say everyone, but most people talk about this who have had these experiences. Some people have had different experiences. But when you experience that, it's like falling into the arms of thousands of mothers and fathers who are all of infinite love, and realizing that you were never gone. It's kind of like you just left for a while and you were never gone. I honestly don't know how I didn't not leave.
No, I get it. It's hard to understand how it's so wonderful and so loving, and you could actually choose to come back. But a mother's love is a super strong thing too.
Right. It is. And part of that, it comes mother's love and the responsibility that we know and feel as mothers. We make that decision, and we're there in the presence of our Lord, who is encouraging us and filling us with that kind of strength of, you can do this. If this is for a greater good, you can do this. Because wasn't that the epitome of everything that Christ did? It was all for the greater good of all. And he empowers you with that strength. You definitely don't want to leave. I often think about it, and I often think, gosh, what it would have been like if I had just gone. And it's like, what would have happened to my children? Would they be better off? Would they be worse off? You think all these things. You wonder.
Those are great what if kind of questions that, yeah, but it's okay that we don't know the answers to. I want to talk about the selflessness versus selfishness. Did you get the idea that everybody there, this is what they're learning? I think you mentioned that it's a big part of why we're here in this life is to learn the difference. I don't see a lot of people as they get older, getting that much more selfless. Explain more. How do we learn this in this world? How do we take it with us? What kinds of things help us learn this lesson?
Well, this is ironically what most of my books talk about, which is the path of purification. In fact, I wrote a book called From Selfishness to Selflessness, and it's a comparison of ancient sacred texts from all world traditions and the process that all world traditions encourage us to undergo as a practice. But the path of purification is actually what we come here to do in a mortal world, so that we will enter into the process that souls incarnate here for, which is the initiation into, so to speak, the process wherein a soul begins to recognize that we are in a mortal realm. What does that mean? It's a third and fourth dimensional realm where the battles between good and evil go on. They go on inside of us, they go on outside of us. And we all have good and evil, light and dark, things that we have that are life giving, things that are death dealing with inside of us. And so, in order to actually do something about it, we actually have to enter into an actual path of purification. And a path of purification, well, what is that? Well, in some traditions, like for instance in Catholicism, mystical theology lays it out for us. You can read like the Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross, or an Introduction to the Devout Life by St. Francis de Sales, the Spiritual Life by Father Adolphe Tanqueray. And these are actually textbooks on the process of how do we do that self-intrusive examination of identifying those things within ourselves that we are doing that are selfish or are dark or are moving away from God rather than moving towards God. And when we enter into this path of purification, we accelerate our spiritual journey to the point where it becomes possible for us to actually choose a higher thrust at the time of our death, where we can actually ascend from this realm and go to the next level of development instead of doing the same things over and over again. Because you're absolutely right that most people walk through this life blindly and they do not progress. And we call this karmic circling. They just turn in circles. They can spend 20 years and not identify the most basic of what we might call a fetter or a hindrance or a sinful nature that needs to be altered in order for their soul to take another step. And these are little selfishnesses, right? But they're hindrances and fetters and cravings and things that hold them back.
All right, let's do this, if you don't mind. I want to take a less theoretical, less theological approach as we talk about this for a second and talk about more practical, real stuff instead. Okay? Because some of that goes above my head. I admit it. This person wrote about that path and this circular thing. And okay, I want to talk about some real things that I believe. I think one of the reasons, just to go back to your learning to be selfless, I think one of the reasons that we came here to this earth and took on these bodies was there were things that we could only learn here by experience. For example, I was much more selfish before I had our first baby compared to after having a child. You become selfless in many ways through an experience like that that maybe we can only have here. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Can you think of some others like that?
Absolutely. There are all kinds of things in our earthly experience that offer us the opportunity to become more selfless. And it has, with children, for instance, having a handicapped child allows us that opportunity. Being married and staying with your spouse and going through the illness and health, going through aging and the things that are going to happen to both parties. Having children who end up with illnesses, but it's also the day-to-day things that we have to learn to love one another as Jesus says, as I have loved you, even though we're imperfect. So loving each other even when we disagree, even when we don't understand why the other person thinks differently than we do, the smaller selflessness is, right? And so one of the simple ways that people do this is that they recognize like the vices in themselves. Like, so for instance, if someone's like, I'm kind of mean spirited. And so then they might say, well, that means I need to try to cultivate more of a kind heart in order to counter my mean spiritedness. And so they will either engage in practices, prayer, meditation, spiritual reading, or they will actually go out and do something that's kind-hearted. So it can be whether it's with their own children, they might go volunteer at a home for the handicapped, they might go volunteer at a home for the elderly, they might go volunteer at something else that they are good at, where they can offer their special gifts and they learn to give freely of themselves, right? It can be a lot of different things. So these things can come down to like basic things like little vices that people have, whether it's lust or greed or anger, things like that. And then you look at the opposite virtues, which would be temperance, prudence, purity, slow to anger. And a lot of this then comes to giving more time to understanding rather than focusing entirely on I need to be understood. Realize that you need to be more understanding. You need to listen more so that you can also become more selfless and actually try to understand other people instead of just demanding that everyone understand you, which, if we're honest with ourselves, people never understand us completely. We have to just try to be understanding to one another, right? Because we're all different. We're all so different. There is a process that goes deeper, which is that process of mystical theology, which really helps you to hone that process in. But life itself, as you said, getting married, having children, those are part of the life process itself that forces these teachings on us. Our aging parents, our aging spouses, illnesses that we don't expect, things that we don't expect, horrible things that happen to people, accidents, violence, injury, war, all the things that people are faced with where they can choose their response is going to show us opportunities where we can learn to become more selfish or more selfless. Does this make sense?
Yeah, and maybe if we had not come here, because people sometimes ask me, what did we come here for? Okay. And we're talking about one of those things. Why? Maybe a lot of these things without the trials that we have here on this planet, we just couldn't learn without them. Just makes sense to me. Okay.
Right.
All right. Just a couple other little things. The the sounds that you heard, which I'm gonna put words in your mouth, were they like hellish kind of sounds? You heard, I forget the term that you used, coming all these voices, cacophony.
You don't want to know what hellish sounds sound like because I've been down there too. But the sounds I heard coming off the earth were more of the cacophony of people complaining, screaming at each other. It's what we see in our world today, ironically. And we didn't see as much of it at the time that I had the vision. It was interesting to me because I was like, really? Is that what it's going to be like? And yeah, I guess it is. And it's the way that we see where what we see in our society right now, people are not listening to one another. They're just yelling and screaming at each other and demanding something of one another and not hearing anything. And what they're doing, they don't realize this is what you see in a chaos realm, which is a purgatorial realm, where people just kind of bump off of each other and there's no rhyme or reason. Nothing actually gets resolved that way. You have to actually stop the cacophony. You have to stop the bumping off of each other. You have to change the energy where people have to stop. They have to step back. They have to start listening to one another. Even if you don't like what someone is saying, you have to listen long enough to understand. Even if once you understand, you're like, wow, I understand what they think. And gosh, wow, I think that's crazy. You need to still be willing to understand where people are coming from. This is what you have to have civil discourse, and you have to be able to love one another as God has loved you. And I think it's a good mantra, frankly, which is love one another as God has loved you. Every time you're tempted to just start doing that, stop, step back, and love one another as God has loved you. Because anytime you just start attacking people, you're doing something that has no purpose, it has no response that is useful. You're wasting your time and ability to generate and create more of the things, the qualities, the selflessness, to cultivate a higher state of being that you are here to do. It's kind of like you're wasting spiritual energy that was given to you as a gift. You know, being born here is not an accident, it's a gift. What we are seeing a lot of these days is people wasting a lot of good gifts, and they're not progressing just the way you originally stated it. People are not getting more selfless as they get older. They're not making progress as they get older. And all these things need to happen, but it's also happening. It's happening across the board in the youth and in every age bracket, where we're not seeing the progressions that should be happening as a result of incarnating into this realm and the purpose of it being made manifest.
Well, if we were to talk about characteristics of Jesus, you brought him up, and we could talk about selfless. We could talk about the opposite. If you also believe in a devil or a Satan, that would be the epitome of the selfish. And some of these things you're talking about, I wish you would just go to Washington and preach to all of the politicians on both sides of the aisle and the politicians all over the world for that matter. Let's get back to, if we just love a little more and serve a little more and be a little more selfless, world's going to be a whole lot better place. Hey, why don't you leave us with just a couple of things? One, I'm curious your level of your fear of death since the experiences that you've had, and leave us with some kind of a brief message of hope.
I'm not afraid of death at all. Sometimes I just have to like kind of temper my excitement about it because, you know, I look forward to it, is what I'd say. You know, the message of hope would be that we do have the power within us, within our hands, to change the world. Every single one of us does. It's not in the way that I think many of us have thought. It's in the fact that the power to change the world is in our power to change ourselves and the way that we interact with this world. Interact with this world in a higher way. And the more of us who do that, it will change the whole world. It will change everyone's ability and what they have to do in order to interact with the world in a way that matters.
All right, Marilynn, thank you so very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, me too.
Thanks again for listening and sharing this podcast. Don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button and sign up for our newsletter at roundtripdeath.com. If you want to share your near-death experience, or if you have questions or comments about the show, send an email to eric@roundtripdeath.com. Until then, I wish you everything good that you're looking for in this life and the next.